Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I work with SCB Housing, and this is the information session for the 68 total affordable rental units at Modera South Shore in Marshfield. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available apartments. I'll also cover the application and eligibility and lottery processes and what to expect after the lottery takes place. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat function in Zoom, or I'll be asking throughout the presentation if you have any questions. You can unmute yourself at that time. You were muted when you came into the meeting, just to minimize any unnecessary noise while we're all in this chat or all in this meeting. So this is a live session. It's being recorded and it will be saved to SCB Housing's YouTube channel. So it'll be available there if anyone wants to catch it that wasn't able to join us. And after tonight, if you think of any questions that you did not ask, you can contact us at info@scbhousing.com or at that 617 phone number there. So just for some background information on who we are. So SCB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. We're not the on-site management team at Modera. We haven't seen the building. We've been hired by the developer to market these affordable apartments, conduct this information session, and we will also be the ones who are collecting and reviewing your applications for the affordable housing component. So we'll determine your eligibility for the affordable housing program, and we'll also run the lottery when the time comes. So in the initial phases of this process, we at SCB Housing are your main point of contact, but then further along, the on-site management team at Modera South Shore will take over as your main point of contact. So there's a few steps in the process. The first is to apply for the lottery. So there is an application deadline of September 2nd, so about, I guess, 3 weeks or so from today. There is an online application. The link to that is on your screen right now. So there's a jot form link for an online application. There's also a paper application, which I'll mention as well if you would rather fill it out that way. So SCB Housing, we're your main point of contact during that process. When you're applying for the lottery, we can answer any questions you have on the affordable housing program. And then the second step in the process, after we run the lottery, that's when you'll be in touch with the leasing office, and they're going to determine your lease eligibility. So that's separate from the program screening with SCB Housing. And that lease eligibility that you do with the leasing office might include things like a credit check, rental history check, background check, some things that you might be familiar with from renting elsewhere. And then the third step in the process, once you're approved by the management team or the leasing office and you've been found to be lease eligible to rent at Modera, you'll be directed back to SCB Housing. And at that point, you'll need to submit your verifying income information like pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns, that sort of thing. But to apply for the lottery, when you fill out the online application or a paper application, you're not submitting any information with it. You're just self-reporting your income on that application. So it shouldn't take you a whole lot of time to complete the initial lottery application, because it will just be later on in the process that you would need to gather all of that supporting documentation. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to go to our website, scbhousing.com, because there is a page specific to Modera South Shore. So if you go to our website and then click on affordable housing opportunities, you'll select I want to rent, since this is a rental opportunity. And when you select Modera South Shore, you'll be taken to that page, which has a downloadable version of the application and the information packet. And the information packet is where a lot of the information I'll be covering tonight is from. But we encourage you to take a look at that, even if you are here for the information session, because there's some useful information in there for you if you're interested in applying. We strongly encourage you to complete the application online. On our website, there is that link to the online application, the jot form application. Completing the application online is the quickest way to apply and ensure that your application is received right away. But of course, if you would rather do a paper application and either email it to us or mail it to us, you can do that as well. So there's a PDF version of the application for you online if you'd rather do that. If you submit the application online, you're going to receive an automatic confirmation email. But just know that a few weeks, 1 to 2 weeks after you submit the application, you'll also get a more personalized email from info@scbhousing.com acknowledging how many bedrooms you applied for and your household size and all of that. So just know that we will be in touch with you within a week or two of getting your application. That automatic kind of bounce back confirmation email is just letting you know that you submitted the application if it was received. So we encourage you to get your lottery application in early. It shouldn't take all that long to fill out, like I said, because we are not requiring supporting documentation at this early stage. And you don't need to be a resident of Marshfield to apply for the lottery. There will be some apartments that have priority for Marshfield residents, but not all of them. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But again, September 2nd is the deadline for the lottery, for the applications. So once you get that into us, we will get back to you if there's anything missing, or if you've been approved for the lottery, you will be notified. It is anticipated that the first affordable units at Modera South Shore will be available for occupancy soon after the lottery, which is going to be held on September 15th. So there won't be too much of a wait at all after all of the eligibility screening for interested applicants. And just to give you a little bit more information about the property, there's 26 one-bedroom affordable apartments, and the rent for those is on your screen now. It's $2,264. 4 of those, I have a typo there. 4 of those one-bedroom apartments are, let me just check that out here. So this is the information packet. Yep, 4 of those one-bedroom apartments are mobility accessible. So they have disabled accessible features. 2 of the one-bedrooms are hearing and visual impairment accessible. And then there's also 27 two-bedroom apartments. And 2 of those 2 bedrooms are disabled accessible. There's also 15 3-bedroom apartments, and those will rent for $2,997, and that one of those 3-bedroom apartments is disabled accessible. The property itself, so the community has a resort style swimming pool. There are outdoor lounges, a fitness center. This is a brand new community. There's a sports simulator, some work from home spaces in the common areas, and all utilities, with the exception of sewer, are paid for by the tenants. So tenants will be responsible for electric heating, cooking, hot water, general electricity, and their water usage, but the sewer is included. The sewer charges are included in the rent. And there is parking for residents that is included as well. So the rents for this program, I should mention before moving on, are set in accordance with a formula for the affordable housing program. They don't change based off of a individual household income or circumstances. So the rents won't change if your income increases or decreases. And the formula that the rents are set by is based off of HUD, so the Federal Housing and Urban Development area median income for the Boston, Marshfield area. It is possible that rents increase once per year, usually around the time that HUD releases their area median incomes. That's an annual rollout. And tenants will always be given a heads up, several months notice of a rent increase. And rents cannot increase within your lease term. So if you were to sign a lease for September of this year, for example, or I guess it would need to be October or later of this year, given when the lottery is. If you were to sign a lease for October 1st, your rent would be the same for the first 12 months. So it wouldn't change until at least October 1st, 2026. So before I move on to the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program, does anyone have any questions on kind of the logistical information about how to apply, or a basic overview of the community? All right, if not, I'm going to move on to the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So all of this is listed in the information packet, but just to kind of work through it with you or talk through it, there are 4 eligibility requirements. The first is, and I've already touched on this, but that households have to have a qualifying income. So I'll talk more about the numbers that you see on your screen here, but household income needs to be at or below 80% of the area median income in order to qualify, and that's your annual income for the whole household. Households who have an income above the amounts on your screen won't be eligible for the lottery. Second, households cannot own a home upon move-in. So if you own a home now, it would need to be sold prior to leasing an affordable apartment. And then you should also know that household priority is going to be given based on household composition. And what that means is larger households are going to have priority for larger units. So that generally means that households with more members are going to have priority on the waiting list over, say, a 1-person household who's applying for a 2-bedroom, for example. But you also want to keep in mind for this lottery in particular, you are not able to apply for a 2-bedroom if you're a 1-person household unless you have a disability that requires a reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom. So that's covered in there as well, but just keep that in mind. And then fourth, it doesn't come up very often, but you can't have financial interest in the development, so you can't be considered a related party. And what that means for this program is if you work for the developer, if you work for the management company at Modera, you wouldn't be eligible for this opportunity. And then just to circle back on the income criteria, maximum income limits are set by household size. And so if you look at this, if you're a 1-person household, your total household income needs to be below $92,650 in order to apply for the lottery. And then it goes up from there. If you're a 2-person household, your income can't be above, your total annual household income can't be above about $105,800. And if you're above those amounts, you'd be considered over income. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what incomes are counted and things like that and how we calculate your income. But just keep in mind that the amount that you see for the maximum income limit, those are set by the program and those are set in stone. If you're, $10 above them, then you won't be eligible for this lottery. Whereas you can see the approximate minimum income, say approximate. And the reason that they do is because these are set by the management office, so the leasing team over at Modera South Shore. So if you're a 1-person household looking to apply for a 1-bedroom apartment, it says that your approximate minimum income would be $67,900. If you had a total household income of $66,000, for example, but you had a lot of assets that you would be able to access to pay your rent, the leasing office could approve you based off of their lease parameters. So just keep that in mind. The approximate minimum income amounts have a little bit of wiggle room if the leasing office would like to consider, assets that you can access, whereas the maximum income limits are set in stone. So you do need to be below these to be eligible for the lottery. And I should also say, too, that the minimum incomes don't apply to anyone who has a housing subsidy. So if you have a Section 8 voucher that you plan on using at Modera or MRVP voucher, any of those vouchers, you can disregard the minimum income limits because they don't apply to households who have vouchers, since your housing agency will be picking up part of the monthly rent for you. And then just a little bit about how we're going to calculate your income, even though we don't need verification of your income until after the lottery. If you're approved for the lottery, you will be sent a documentation requirements guide or a link to it. And that kind of details exactly what type of documentation we'll need from you depending on your sources of income, how many pay stubs, how many bank statements and that sort of thing. So It's kind of a cheat sheet that you want to keep in mind just when the time comes to submit information to us. So keep an eye out for that. If you're approved for this lottery, it will come to you as a link by email. But income for this program, this affordable housing program, is counted as a projection of a household's income over the next 12 months. So it's basically SEB Housing has to do their best to estimate what your household income will be in the next 12 months. That includes, any money you might be making through bonuses or overtime. Really the only exceptions to it are minors, so anyone under the age of 18 who's earning a wage, we're not going to count that wage income. And then also a dependent full-time student, so maybe you have a 20-year-old who's in college. If they're working, it's only the first $480 of their wages that we would count towards your total household income. It is gross income that we're required to, I forgot to go to this slide here, but it is gross income that we are required to count. So it is the amount you make before taxes, although most of us are not taking home the gross amount that's listed on your pay stub. It is what we need to calculate according to the program regulations. And then how we calculate your income is a little bit different depending on your circumstances. So some applicants are going to have a weekly salary that's consistent throughout the year. Their pay stubs are showing that they make the same exact amount every week or biweekly. But other people are going to be self-employed or working seasonally or per diem. And in those circumstances, we'll need to look further into your past to be able to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. So just know that if you're self-employed or if you're per diem, there may be more information that we'll need from you to get a better picture. And then specifically for anyone who's self-employed, you will need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for any business expenses and that sort of thing. And generally, any income that you were making in the past year, we will have to continue counting it towards your total household income unless we have some sort of definitive documentation that you won't be at a certain job anymore, or that maybe, overtime is not going to be available this coming year, that sort of thing. And so when you're filling out your application, just make sure that you're listing everything on there. Not just wage income, but if anyone in the household is receiving Social Security benefits, child support, a pension, or, workman's compensation, unemployment, that sort of thing, just make sure that all of that is written down. And so there's no asset limit for rental lotteries. So you could have, for example, maybe you're retired and you have a lot of assets, you have a lot of money in the bank, that's fine. We will still need to, even though there's no limit to the amount of assets you can have, we do still need to ask for bank statements and verify your asset information, because if any of your assets are generating income, there is a portion of that that will need to be included in your total household income. So that goes for, the net cash value of 401ks, checking savings accounts, that sort of thing. We don't need documents related to personal assets like cars or anything like that. And so I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in this opportunity, get your application in as soon as possible just to get the process started. And I want to mention too that when you're filling out your application, you can apply for more than one unit size. So if you think you might be interested, for example, in both a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, you should indicate that on your application, because there's really no downside to doing that. But there is a potential downside if you only apply for example, a 2-bedroom. And then you later decide that you would have been interested in a 3-bedroom, because what will happen is you won't be on that initial waiting list for the 3-bedroom since you didn't apply for it, and you'll be added to the bottom of the waiting list, and it could potentially be pretty long depending on the interest in this lottery. So just apply for any units that you're interested in, and we'll review your lottery application and contact you if anything appears to be missing, and we'll give you a chance to correct or add to your application and resubmit it before the deadline. So if you're found to be eligible for the lottery, you'll be sent by email, you'll be sent a lottery application number, which will be in the form of a series of numbers. So if you were the first person to be found eligible for this lottery, you would have an application number of A.001, for example. And that's not a ranking of any sort. It's just meant to be anonymous, so we're not calling your name during the lottery itself. That email will also confirm whether your household qualifies for local preference. So if you reported on your lottery application that you believe your household qualifies for that preference, you would need to submit verification that you either, live in Marshfield, work in Marshfield, a business located within the town, or provide proof that you are a guardian of a child attending Marshfield Public Schools. All of that information doesn't need to come in until after the lottery when you're submitting your pay stubs and verifications and all of that, but just keep in mind that if you indicate that you have local preference, you will need to submit verification of that. And that's because certain waiting lists for this property have local preference, which means that local preference households will have higher positions on the waiting list compared to households of the same size who do not have local preference. And if you look at our info packet, you'll be able to see the waiting list and how they are ranked and all of that. But if you do not have local preference, that should not dissuade you at all from applying for this lottery, because like I said, only certain units have that preference, and we also don't know how many people that have local preference will be applying. That email that you receive will also confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, and will also confirm if you indicated that you need a disabled accessible apartment. So when you get that email with your lottery application number, just make sure to look it over very carefully, because that information, you want to make sure that all that information is accurate and let us know if something does not look right. Because you want to make sure that you're on the right waiting list, obviously, when the time comes. And then during this process, if you're found to be ineligible by SCB Housing at any point, maybe you're over income, for example, you'll be informed by email, and you're encouraged to reach out to us with any questions, of course. So on your application, you will have indicated your household type. So 1, 2, or 3 will be your household type. In some cases, smaller households can apply for larger units, but in general, the larger households are going to have priority over smaller households. So the information packet has a lot more info on household types, but just as an example, a type 1 household could consist of, one person, or it could be two adults who share a bedroom, and those 2 adults who share a bedroom could apply for a 2-bedroom unit in this case, but they wouldn't have priority for it. And again, just to keep in mind for this lottery specifically, 1-person households can't live in a 2-bedroom apartment. 2-bedroom households can't apply for a 3-bedroom apartment unless the household member has a disability, which would require an extra bedroom. So the lottery itself will be held on September 15th. So that will be a couple of weeks after the application deadline. And it will be held via Zoom, just like this information session. So at 6 p.m. on September 15th, and it will be held digitally, meaning that lottery numbers will be randomized on the screen and shared with you. So the results will be shared via a screen share. Every lottery number is included in the lottery. So sometimes you think, there's 68 apartments, there's only going to be 68 numbers drawn, but that's not how these types of lotteries work. So the purpose of the lottery is to establish an order of priority on the waiting list. So in general, it's more beneficial if your number is early in the list of results, but it may not necessarily be the deciding factor on whether or not you move forward in the process to lease one of these apartments, because we first need to sort the results by priority. So for example, if a type 1 household, like a 2-person couple, is drawn first in the lottery and they applied for a 2-bedroom apartment, they're still going to be behind all of the type 2 households who have priority on that 2-bedroom waiting list. Also, there could be households who were entered into the lottery that are found ineligible by the leasing office, or ultimately decide not to rent the apartment. So if your number is drawn later on and you're a little bit further down the waiting list, you shouldn't lose hope at being able to move forward in the process, because you might still have that opportunity depending on how many people ahead of you on the waiting list drop off. So right after the lottery, SEB Housing populates those waiting lists, and we share them with you so you have a better understanding of where you fall on the waiting list. Because during the lottery itself, it's not really all that clear, since we haven't sorted the results by priority. We share those results with you the same evening of the lottery. So December 15th, sometime later on that evening is when they would be sent to you. And then right after the lottery, we move on to the next step in the process, which is to send all of the waiting list information over to the leasing office at Modera South Shore. And that management team over there will contact the top households from each waiting list to complete the lease screening. So you'll have about 5 days to get in touch with them and initiate that lease screening process. And again, just a reminder that lease screening is separate from the program screenings that SEB Housing does. So the lease screening with the actual management office on site will be, usually a credit check, background check, rental history check, that sort of thing. And it's likely that the leasing office will invite more households than there are units to complete their lease screening, because they want to make sure that the process is moving along and they're not stuck on, one application at a time. Once your lease approved, that's the point in the process where having a position near the top of the waiting list is the most beneficial to you, because if you're the top person on, say, the 2-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the first choice at reserving any of the 2-bedroom affordable apartments. And that's true even if someone behind you on the waiting list finished their screening first, because the leasing office needs to, and SEB Housing needs to honor the order of the waiting list. So like I said, if you're the top person on a 2-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the top selection of the available units. And then the second person on the waiting list will have the next choice at the remaining units. Once you reserved one of the apartments with the management team, the leasing office will let SEB Housing know, and we will contact you so you can start the process of your program eligibility, submitting all of your pay stubs and income information in order for us to do that review. And then hopefully by that point, you've taken a look at the documentation requirements guide that I mentioned that will be sent to you by email, and you've had an idea of what you were going to need to gather to send over to us. You'll have about 10 days to get that information into us. But of course, we will work with you. So if you submit a incomplete packet the first time around and you still have to get some more information into us, we will just send you an incomplete notice with a due date and a deadline to get that into us. So we always work with everyone. We know it's a lot of information to supply, and it might be a little bit delay of getting all that information into us. So we certainly work with you and understand that. Once you lease an apartment, you are finished with income screenings. So you won't have to do anything with SEB Housing to recertify your income. You would be doing that through the leasing office, most likely, before the first year of your lease is up. So your lease renewal, if you signed a lease for October 1st this year, your lease would be renewed October 1st of next year. And about 3 months before that, the leasing office will start the recertification process with you. So we always just like to remind everyone, if you are renting an affordable apartment, you kind of just keep in a file, or just know that you are going to have to submit income information each year to the leasing office. And then at your lease renewal, if your income has increased and you now have an income that's above 80% of the area median income, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable housing to rent at the affordable price, as long as your household income doesn't exceed 140% of the next year's area median income. So in this case, you would have, if you were a 2-person household, You would have qualified for this lottery at $105,000. If your income was below $105,850, that same family next year at lease renewal can make up to $148,190 at the time of their recertification in order to remain eligible for that affordable apartment. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there for households who maybe have a raise or get a higher paying job throughout the year. So just keep that in mind. That's about all of the information I wanted to get through from the information packet about this lottery. Again, if you have any questions after tonight, info@sdbhousing.com is the best way to get in touch with us, or the quickest way. But if you prefer calling, this number here is great as well. Any questions? I'll put the first slide up here. Again, the application deadline is the 2nd, so it's actually 3 weeks from today. And I should mention too that if you are applying online and you're using that online application, it will shut down at 2 p.m. on September 2nd, so that's why it says an exact time there. The online application link will not be accessible after 2 p.m. How much is the security deposit for the unit? So I don't know. Let me see if we have that info. I don't think we have that information from the property, but I can check for you. Legally, they can charge you up to the full rent for the month. It can't exceed the monthly rent. Yep, so it will range, they did actually answer this question, so it will range between either $500 up to the full month rent, depending on credit screening. So if you have a more favorable credit, you may only need to put down $500, whereas if your credit isn't quite as good, you might have to pay up to the full amount of rent. Sure, the information packet, just a question here about where to get it. So if you go on our website to sdbhousing.com and you click I want to rent, you'll see a page specific to Modera South Shore, and there's a PDF on that website link to get it from there. So it's available on there. Anything else? We look forward to getting your applications. Like I said, September 2nd is the deadline, so you got about 3 weeks. You get to pick which phase you want to move to. So, right, if the apartments are not all available at once, you do get to select which apartment you would like to move into. So if the apartments are not all ready at the same time and you are more interested in an apartment that's going to be ready a few months from now, you are able to reserve that apartment rather than the units that are coming on right away. Any other questions? So there's a question here. I was told you can't pick a particular unit. So the first person on the waiting list will have first choice at, for example, 2 bedrooms. If you're the first person on the waiting list, you will have the first choice at the 2-bedroom apartment, and it goes down the list from there. So you do have a choice of which unit you want to reserve, but if you're not the first person on the waiting list, you won't have all of the units to select from. You'll only have the remaining units available to you. Can you use rental vouchers? Yep. Section 8 MRVP, any mobile housing voucher can be used at the property. You just need to know that your the agency that administers your voucher is going to have to work with the property, and you're going to have to make sure that the agencies or these rents will fall within the allowable rents for the payment standard or the max income, or the max rent for the program that you have. The general answer is yes. So. Anything else? All right, we look forward to getting your application. If you have any other questions you didn't think of, please feel free to reach out to us at info@sdbhousing.com. And we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks for your attendance and participation. I appreciate it. Have a good night.